Imagine a time when the world is left defenseless against thousands of diseases and infections. A time when none of our medicines work against the microbes that they're supposed to kill. For malaria, that time is close. Today, the world is faced by the pervasive problem of drug resistance. This happens when microbes develop the ability to defeat the drugs designed to kill them. Infections caused by resistant germs are difficult and sometimes impossible to treat.
Take a look at a disease that we've all heard about malaria. As of today, the last line of defense against malaria is a treatment known as ACT, or artemisinin combination therapy. Until very recently, this therapy produced effective and reliable results in treating infected patients. But evidence has recently begun to emerge indicating that malarial parasites are developing resistance to this treatment, which could potentially make malaria untreatable in the years to come. What we propose to do is not just combat the problem of drug resistance, but to entirely eradicate the disease from society. This objective is achieved by three main modules of our project: therapeutics, public education, and diagnostics. All three of them are just as important when it comes to eradicating malaria. We were able to identify and target some of the crucial problems associated with each step after talking to experts. For therapeutics, the problem of drug resistance is ever growing. In the case of public education, we learned that there is a massive lack of awareness about the disease, and for diagnostics, accessibility and infrastructure are lacking in remote areas.
Of all the diseases out there, why did we choose to work on malaria? Given our own struggles with battling mosquitoes during the rainy seasons and belonging to a tropical country, the prevalence of the disease was not new. In 2018 alone, 228 million people were infected by the disease worldwide. It is one of society's oldest battles, and yet it still claims hundreds of thousands of lives each year. Lack of accessibility to healthcare in the areas worst affected, poverty, lack of sanitation and information, amongst many other things, lead to the continued prevalence of malaria today. The problem is further exacerbated by reports of increasing drug resistance worldwide. We felt a very strong social and moral responsibility to contribute to the ongoing efforts to eradicate the disease, which takes an unimaginable toll on millions of people each year.
How exactly do we plan to tackle drug resistance in case of malaria? We formulated the creation of a novel peptide drug library. Here is how it works. We have understood that it is virtually impossible to prevent microbes from developing resistance as they evolve. So we have targeted multiple host parasite protein interactions that are essential for the life cycle of parasite protein in the human body. And through various computational methods, we have designed interaction-specific inhibitors that have the potential to be developed into a consumable drug against malaria. Since we have targeted an array of such crucial host parasite interactions, we decided to call it a peptide drug library. Essentially, one would be able to choose a drug from this library and use it to treat malarial patients until the parasites have developed resistance against them. The predicted time span for this to happen is roughly 10 to 12 years for a given drug. At such a time, another drug could be chosen from this library, hence offering a long-term solution to keep treating malaria. And the magical element that makes it all possible is the cyclotides. The cyclotides are plant-derived circular peptides that are robust, cost-effective, efficient, orally bioavailable, and resistant to degradation. They have also previously been used for potential therapeutic solutions to diseases like HIV and be grafted with peptides of interest for increased stability, making them optimal candidates for our drug design. Our colleagues from Tübingen's team connected us to Dr. Welleman, who is a professor at Institute of Tropical Medicine in Tübingen, Germany. Based on our meeting with him, we decided to work on Plasmodium falciparum strain of malaria instead of Vivax, as the problem of drug resistance is much more severe for that strain. For the peptide drug library, we selected the interactions in the following way.
So when it comes to designing drugs in silico, the first step is to find out what is currently available on the internet related to our study. We gathered as much information available from the PDB database using advanced searching and a custom web parser. We got 444 results from the database and shortlisted 47 potential interactions and has worked on 5 of them. The PDB file obtained from the database had few missing regions in the protein structure. So we did homology modeling using Swiss model to fill in those regions. This was essential since we need to have complete structural information of all the regions to find out the interacting residues and design the inhibitory peptide. Now, after we have modeled the missing region, we try to find out which regions of the human protein interacted with the parasite protein. We use knowledge-based approaches to find out the regions of the human protein which are proximal to the parasite one. In the case of the interaction shown above, that is the 5-LGD-PDB, we got one motif which was essential for binding with the parasite protein. The next step was to optimize our inhibitory sequence. We used computational saturated mutagenesis to make point mutations in the inhibitory sequence by replacing the wild-type amino acid residue with all the 20 amino acids at each position recursively. Since the inhibitory sequence had 10 amino acids in the example above, we got 200 mutants including the original sequences repeated. After obtaining all the mutants, we tried to select the best few sequences by assigning scores using the interaction energy obtained by Foldex. We shortlisted the best performing sequences for further studies. We performed molecular dynamic simulation for the shortlisted inhibitors and analyzed its stability in the simulator system. We looked at the distance between the centroids of parasite protein and the inhibitor and also the hydrogen bonds formed between them to study their stability. We chose the best performing mutant inhibitor and attempted to graft it to our cyclotide backbone and study how it behaved in silico. The study is still rudimentary and needs further improvements to get more reliable data. Now, Abdul will take you through the wet lab aspects.
Now that we had the results of our inhibitory peptide sequences ready, we began constructing drug delivery system using our magical element, the cyclotide Kalata B1. During our literature studies, we found that cyclotides require circularization accessories for proper folding. So while browsing through the registry, we found out about the split-in-gene mechanism to circularize the protein. And we decided to use the circularization construct developed by the 2014 Heidelberg team that had previously used the C and the N inteins to build their circularization construct. However, we noticed that these parts developed by them were incompatible with the RF cloning or the Gibson's assembling strategy. So we eventually planned to modify their parts. By modifying those parts, we built a ready-to-use drug delivery system that you can use to graft in the peptide sequence of your choice to block protein interaction that you wish to target using the construct shown here. To do further studies, if the drug actively inhibits the interaction, we wanted the domain structures of the host and the parasite protein synthesized. So for all the sets of interactions, we developed new biobricks and gene circuits to synthesize these host and the parasite proteins. As a part of our cloning strategy, we decided to use the RF cloning technique and the PET28A plus vector shown here for the expression due to its high expression efficiency and the inducibility. Here we realized that the commonly used PET28A plus vector had several unnecessary components like the extra 6xx tags or the thrombin sites, etc. that could interfere with our purification strategies. So we modified the plasmid backbone part uploaded by the 2016 iGEM Istanbul tech team into an easy to use part that is highly compatible with RF cloning strategy. As for purification, we plan to use 6xx tag and strep2 tag for purifying the host and the parasite protein respectively. With this, our production strategy was all set for cloning. And now the question remains, does the drug really work? To find out the answer to this question, we developed 3 assays to test the efficacy and the toxicity of a drug. First comes the solid phase nickel NTA assay, in which we study the relative binding of the host and the parasite protein in the presence and the absence of the drug using the nickel NTA bead. Then, in the IC50 assay, we check the drug toxicity by varying different concentration levels of the cyclotide drug. And finally, to test the efficacy of the drug on the infected RBC cells, we designed the RBC invasion assay using the flow cytometry. Now, most importantly, for each of these assays, we developed our own protocols for standardizations of its measurements. Though the corona pandemic had shut down the labs all over the world, but in a short span of 15 days, we were able to produce wet lab results. The gel shown here is the evidence of successful characterization of the basic part that we have developed to synthesize the host protein CD36. With this, we come to the end of the journey of wet lab.
Even with the existence of effective drugs and the knowledge of how to tackle malaria, it still plagues society today. To understand why, we talked to Dr. Priyanka Devkar, who heads the Community Medicine Department at STR DIMSR. From her insights, we realized that a major hurdle in eradicating malaria is a lack of public awareness and a lax attitude toward it. To effectively fight the disease, community participation would thus be crucial. As a part of our human practices module, we aim to bridge this gap by conducting outreach activities and stakeholder interactions to create public awareness. Lakshmi will tell you more.
We wanted to discover exactly how much the general public knew about malaria. We developed a simple survey and translated it into 11 vernacular languages. The findings from this survey were interesting to say the least. 45% of our respondents reported never using mosquito net during the monsoon season, although mosquito nets are a well-documented way to prevent mosquito-borne diseases. 30% of our respondents reported not knowing that treatments against malaria exist. In order to bridge this gap, we planned and executed many outreach activities. One of the members from our team was interviewed on a radio channel where she spoke about the importance of personal hygiene and cleanliness of one's surroundings in preventing such diseases. We teamed up with the iGEM team from ISWR Behrampur and organized a webinar for school students that spoke about the dangers of such mosquito-borne diseases and how to prevent them. We also created a fun little malaria song to spread public awareness, and you can find this on our wiki. In order to teach school students a little bit about synthetic biology, we devised a fun module that used tangrams, simple mathematical puzzles, to teach them a little bit about the same.
The iGEM team from UPCH Peru put us in touch with Dr. Gamboa, a malarial scientist. She mentioned how people living in remote regions face huge issues accessing diagnostic tests and treatments for malaria. Taking this feedback, our team set out to see if we could develop a diagnostic kit that would be accessible to people living in such areas.
The main idea behind our diagnostics kit is to increase the accuracy of the test itself and to make the process of diagnosing patients a lot more easier and accessible, especially for people in remote areas. To do so, we created a deep learning software which is based on convolutional neural networks. This software is able to analyze blood smear images and tell you whether a given image is positive or negative for the presence of malarial parasites. This software would replace the need for an expert to diagnose patients. The software was trained using a dataset of around 27,000 images, of blood smear images, where each image has been segregated by an expert to be positive or negative for the presence of malarial parasites. This software will be present in the form of a web API. So if you want to know whether a person has malaria or not, all you have to do is take the blood smear of that person, use your smartphone and take an image of that blood smear and upload it to the software. And the software will tell you whether the given image contains malarial parasites. There are two more components to our diagnostics kit, namely the fold scope and the paper centrifuge. We need our smartphones to achieve a magnification of about 100x so that the software can analyze the blood smear image and give a result. So we decided to borrow the idea of the fold scope, which was developed and devised by Dr. Manu Prakash and Jim Sibalski. The fold scope is an origami-based microscope, and which is also cheap and easy to carry around. We also need a centrifuge, and this is because the infected RBCs are generally found in a layer called the buffy coat region, which is found in between the healthy RBCs and the plasma after you centrifuge a blood sample. So we decided to take the idea of the paper centrifuge, which was developed by Dr. Manu Prakash. The paper centrifuge can achieve the required centrifugal force to separate the layers of blood, and is also lightweight and more economical than a normal centrifuge. Together, the Foldscope and the paper centrifuge remove the need for bulky and expensive equipment, and this is especially useful when you're trying to reach remote areas in order to perform diagnostic tests. Our team has also created a user manual where we have put up many video tutorials and demonstrations so that any medical professional can look at these videos and learn how to use the Foldscope and the paper centrifuge.
After performing some basic experiment, we plan to advance our project further and start the process of drug development. Lead molecule optimization is one of the first steps in the process. Measuring MEAE as substance metabolism distribution excretion profile of the drug is also important. This criteria will help us understand pharmacokinetic properties of our drug. After this, there will be multiple phases of preclinical and clinical trials. Only after the completion of trial can any drug be brought into the market. In our interview with Dr. Velvan, he mentioned that we could possibly collaborate with the various organizations to take this project forward. Moving to the human practices, an important step to eradicate malaria would be the implementation of public campaign that will help people understand the seriousness of this disease and inform them of what they can do to prevent its spread. As a part of this campaign, we would like to reach people via animated videos in various languages, informative newspaper articles in local languages, catchy campaigns with slogans, and tie-up with social media influencers are some of the ideas we have so far. Considering the diagnostic section, even though our software so far has given results with accuracy, it needs some improvement. Currently, our software can only analyze pre-processed images, which are similar to the ones that are used to train the model. After our discussion with Purnima Ravindran, we have decided to develop the software by automating the pre-processing step, allowing for faster and easier diagnosis. We are also investigating the possibility of developing software which can measure percentage parasitemia, that is, the percentage of infected RBC in given sample, as it is important from medical point of view. It can be efficient if it is divided into disposable and reusable parts, as discussed with Sriram Raghavendran. We spoke to the doctors who have working experience in rural primary health centers. They advised us to translate the content of our instruction manuals into various languages.
We cannot talk about the future of a drug without taking into consideration the safety aspects of its usage. The biggest safety issue we found with our chosen peptide was the hemolytic activity of the cyclotide galantamine. We found that out of the 6 loops, loop 1 and loop 3 contributed the most towards the hemolytic activity. This was a hazard as the drug we intended to create was to be used internally. We identified the residues responsible for this and replaced it in silico with a strep tag, which would not only reduce the hemolysis but also help us purify the final inhibitory peptide. The next safety issue was metabolism. Since cyclotides are resistant to high temperature and common enzymes, we have to find a way to make sure that they are excreted out of the system properly. A specific protease site can be introduced within one of the loops of the cyclotide to take care of this issue, which would also conserve the circular nature of the protein.
This project would not have been successful without the sincere help from a lot of people. On behalf of 14 voting members, I take this opportunity to thank our PI, Dr. Sanjeev Gulande, whose guidance at right stages has helped us in correctly molding our project. I would also like to thank our all-time mentors, Varsha, Vinayak, Krishnendu, Anirudh, Tejashri and Rashi. And not to forget our experts whose guidance and directions to the various aspects of our project have been invaluable. I would like to thank our sponsors, Reliance Life Sciences, Delta, Snapgene, Genius, IDT and Civic Engineering Corporation, without whose support we could not have fulfilled this dream of ours. In the end, a very special thanks to our dear friends Aharna and Purva for their contribution into designing our wiki, and Shivani for helping us in wet lab experiments, and all the others who were directly or indirectly involved in our project.